The cold night. The wind howled across the snowy military outpost as Private John Miller pulled his thick coat tighter around himself. The night was the coldest he had ever felt in his 3 years of service. His boots crunched in the fresh snow as he walked his patrol route, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. 2 more hours, John muttered to himself, watching his breath form clouds in the freezing air. The outpost sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine trees and mountains. Most soldiers hated being stationed here, but John didn't mind the quiet. That's when he saw them, footprints in the snow that definitely weren't human. They were too big, oddly shaped, and had a faint blue glow that seemed to fade as he watched. John's training kicked in. He clicked off his flashlight and pulled out his rifle, moving quietly as he followed the strange tracks. The footprints led him away from his usual patrol route, deeper into the woods. The trees creaked in the wind, their branches heavy with snow. John's heart beat faster as the tracks got fresher. Whatever made them was close. A soft whimper made him freeze. It came from behind a large rock formation ahead. John raised his rifle and slowly moved forward. He expected many things: a wounded animal, maybe even one of those bears that sometimes wandered into the base. What he saw instead made him lower his weapon in shock. Huddled against the rocks was a girl, but not a human girl. Her skin was silvery and seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. She looked almost human-shaped, but her features were too perfect, too symmetrical. Her hair was white with streaks of pale blue, and her eyes, when she looked up at him in fear, were deep purple with no pupils. She was shivering violently, her thin clothes clearly not made for Earth's winter. Frost covered parts of her skin, and her lips had turned a darker shade of silver that John guessed wasn't normal for her kind. "Please," she whispered in perfect English, though her voice had a musical quality to it. So cold. John knew he should call this in. Unknown alien contact was definitely above his pay grade, but something in those purple eyes stopped him. She looked scared, desperate, and most importantly, freezing to death. "I have a heated tent back at my patrol post," John said softly, trying not to frighten her. "You'll freeze out here. Let me help you." The alien girl tried to stand but stumbled. John caught her before she fell, surprised at how light she felt. Her skin was ice cold to the touch. As he helped steady her, something strange happened. Her skin began to glow faintly where his hands touched her arms, and he felt warmth flowing from his body into hers. "What's happening?" John asked, but didn't let go. The alien girl's shivering lessened slightly. "My people, we absorb heat," she explained weakly. "Share it. Store it. Haven't been warm since I got to your world." John made a quick decision. He took off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "My tent's not far. Can you walk?" She nodded, but after a few steps, it was clear she was too weak. Without hesitation, John picked her up. She weighed almost nothing in his arms. The glow where their bodies touched grew stronger, and he felt the cold biting harder at him without his coat. But her shivering was stopping, and that seemed more important. As they neared his patrol post, the alien girl gripped his shirt suddenly. "They're coming," she whispered, her purple eyes wide with terror. "Who's coming?" John asked, picking up his pace. Before she could answer, her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in his arms. At that exact moment, John's radio crackled to life. "All units be advised." The base commander's voice was tense. "We're picking up multiple unknown aircraft entering our airspace. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." John looked down at the unconscious alien girl in his arms, then up at the dark sky. For a moment, he thought he saw something moving among the stars, something that definitely wasn't a plane. He had a feeling his quiet nights at the outpost were about to get a lot more interesting. Secrets in the snow. John's heart pounded as he carried the unconscious alien girl into his patrol tent. The small heater hummed in the corner, and he quickly laid her on his cot. Her silvery skin still glowed faintly where he touched her, like moonlight on water. "Come on, wake up," he muttered, wrapping her in his emergency blankets. The radio continued buzzing with alerts about the unknown aircraft, but he noticed something odd. His electronic equipment was acting strange. The temperature gauge flickered between extreme numbers, and his phone's screen showed random patterns of light. The alien girl's eyes suddenly snapped open. She sat up with incredible speed, her white-blue hair floating around her head as if underwater. "They're in range," she said, her voice now stronger but filled with fear. "I can feel them searching." "Who's searching?" John asked, keeping his voice calm despite his racing thoughts. "Are those your people up there?" She shook her head, and John watched in amazement as patterns of light began moving under her silvery skin, like northern lights in a winter sky. "Not my people. Hunters. She hesitated, then held out her hand. A small ball of pure energy formed above her palm, giving off both light and heat. "They want what I can do." John stared at the energy ball, feeling its warmth from several feet away. "And what exactly can you do?" "My name is Lyra," she said instead of answering. "I'm a heat weaver. My people can," she struggled with the words, "we shape energy, store it, share it, create with it." The energy ball grew larger, and John noticed the heater in his tent was growing dimmer, its energy seemingly pulled into Lyra's display. Suddenly, she closed her hand and the energy vanished. The heater returned to normal. "The hunters are from a dying world. They think if they capture one of us, they can force us to save their planet. But it doesn't work that way. The gift must be given freely, or it destroys both the taker and the taken." Before John could respond, a deep humming filled the air. Lyra grabbed his arm, her touch sending warmth through his body. "They're using thermal scanners, looking for my heat signature." Her eyes widened. "Your whole base. They'll hurt anyone who gets in their way." John reached for his radio, but Lyra stopped him. "No, if you warn them, the hunters will know exactly where to look. They monitor all electronic signals." The humming grew louder. John peeked outside the tent and froze. 3 dark shapes moved through the snowy forest, unlike anything he'd ever seen. They looked almost human, but were at least 8 feet tall, wearing armor that seemed to absorb light. Where their faces should be, there were only smooth black masks with glowing red sensors. "They can't track me if I'm cold enough," Lyra whispered. Her skin began to fade from silvery to blue, and the temperature in the tent plummeted. John watched in amazement as frost formed on her skin, but she didn't shiver. "But I need your help. What I'm about to show you, no human was ever supposed to see this." Lyra stood up, frost crackling around her feet. She placed her hand on John's chest, and suddenly he felt like he was touching a star, not burning hot, but filled with incredible energy. His vision blurred, and when it cleared, he saw the world differently. Heat signatures glowed everywhere. The trees, the ground, the air itself filled with currents of energy he'd never known existed. "I shared my sight with you," Lyra said, her voice echoing strangely in his head. "Now you can see what they see, and why they hunt us." A massive explosion lit up the night sky, followed by blaring alarms from the base. The hunters had made their move. "Your people or mine, John Miller," Lyra said, her purple eyes glowing brightly. "Someone isn't going to survive this night. The question is, who will you choose to save?" Outside, the 3 hunter figures turned their glowing red sensors directly toward their tent, and John realized time for decisions had just run out. Trust and betrayal. The hunters' heavy footsteps crunched in the snow, getting closer to the tent. John's mind raced as he saw the world through his new heat vision. Everything glowed with different colors of energy, making it hard to focus. Lyra grabbed his hand, and suddenly his vision cleared. "They'll be here in 30 seconds, she whispered. "But I can show you something they don't know about." Without warning, Lyra pressed her palm against the frozen ground. John watched in amazement as lines of blue energy spread out like roots under the snow, creating a complex pattern he somehow knew was important. "The Earth has its own heat networks," Lyra explained quickly. Like veins of warmth running through the cold. My people didn't just find your world by accident. We've been its guardians for centuries. A loud voice boomed from outside, speaking in a language that made John's ears hurt. Lyra responded in the same language, her musical voice now sharp and commanding. The tent's entrance burst open, revealing two hunters. Up close, their armor seemed to bend light around it, and their masks showed scrolling symbols John couldn't understand. "Step aside, human," one hunter said, its voice sounding like grinding metal. "This does not concern you." "He can see the flows now," Lyra said, standing tall despite her earlier weakness. "I shared the sight. He knows what you really are." The hunters stepped back, their masks displaying rapid flashing patterns. John noticed something strange. Where they stepped, the natural heat lines in the ground went dark, like they were draining the Earth's energy just by standing there. "Impossible," the second hunter growled. "You've corrupted the protocols. No human can survive the sharing." But John was more than surviving. Through his enhanced vision, he saw what the hunters couldn't: military vehicles approaching from the base, their heat signatures clear against the cold night. More importantly, he saw how Lyra was quietly gathering energy from deep underground, pulling it up through those ancient heat lines. Last chance, the first hunter raised a weapon that pulsed with dark energy. "Surrender the Heat Weaver." That's when everything happened at once. The military vehicles burst through the trees, spotlights blazing. The hunters turned to face the new threat, but Lyra was faster. She released all the stored energy in a massive wave that sent the hunters staggering. Their armor cracked, revealing something underneath that made John's enhanced vision recoil. They weren't wearing armor at all. The black surface was their skin, and it was hungry for heat. "They're not hunters," Lyra shouted as chaos erupted. "They're parasites. They don't want to save their world, they want to drain ours." The military opened fire, but their bullets passed right through the hunters' forms. John watched in horror as one hunter grabbed a soldier, and through his new vision, he saw the soldier's heat energy being drained instantly, leaving him frozen. Lyra began weaving complex patterns in the air, creating shields of pure energy around the soldiers. "John, the heat lines, we need to seal them. They're trying to tap into the Earth's network." John saw it now. The hunters were driving their hands into the ground, corrupting those ancient heat lines, turning their blue glow into a sickly purple. The temperature plummeted as they began draining the Earth's deep warmth. But something else was happening too. Where Lyra's energy touched the soldiers, they began to see what John saw. One by one, their expressions changed from confusion to understanding as the heat vision spread. "The sharing," Lyra gasped, her power flickering. "It's never spread before, never to so many at once." The hunters rolled in rage as more humans began to see their true nature. They merged together, forming a massive shape of void black energy that towered over the trees. The corrupted heat lines pulsed, spreading darkness through the ground like poison. John looked at Lyra, who was struggling to maintain the shields around the soldiers. He looked at his fellow troops, now seeing the world as he did. And he looked at the ancient heat lines, still glowing faintly blue under the spreading corruption. He made his choice. "How do we fight them?" he asked Lyra. "Really fight them?" Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time she smiled. "We don't fight," she said, holding out her hand. "We share." The giant void form of the merged hunters loomed over them, ready to strike. But now they faced not one heat weaver, but an entire base of humans who could see the truth. And somewhere deep in the earth, the ancient heat lines began to pulse with a new kind of power, human and alien energy, merged into something entirely new. The real battle for Earth's warmth was about to begin. The ice cave. The merged hunter's massive void form towered above the military base, draining heat from everything it touched. Trees crackled and froze, vehicles stalled as their engines turned to ice, and the ground itself began to crack from the extreme cold. But John, Lyra, and the soldiers who now shared the heat vision went running away. they were running towards something. The ancients built focusing points. Lyra shouted as they raced through the frozen forest, places where Earth's heat lines concentrate. "There's one nearby, I can feel it." John could feel it too now, like a warm heartbeat under the snow. The other soldiers followed, their shared vision showing them the way. Behind them, the void creatures' raw, shattered, frozen tree branches. There, John pointed to a cliff face ahead. Through their enhanced sight, they could see heat lines converging behind the rock wall, glowing like magma veins. Lyra pressed her hand against the cliff, and ancient symbols lit up across the rock's surface. The wall shifted, revealing a hidden cave entrance. Quick, inside. They rushed in just as the void creature slammed into the cliff above. The cave should have been dark, but to their heat-enhanced vision, it was alive with color. Crystal formations lined the walls, each one pulsing with stored energy. At the center of the cave stood a pillar of pure light, where all the heat lines connected. "What is this place?" John asked, staring in awe. "A heat forge," Lyra said, touching the central pillar. "My ancestors built these across your world, working with humans who could see as you do now. We weren't just guardians, we were teachers." The cave entrance exploded inward as the void creature forced its way through. But in this ancient place, they could all see its true form clearly. It wasn't just three merged hunters. It was a swarm of energy-draining parasites, thousands of them, sharing one desperate hunger. "Your kind abandoned us," the swarm spoke with many voices. "Left us to freeze in the void between stars. You were cast out because you took without sharing." Lyra shot back. "You drained worlds dry." The soldiers raised their weapons, but John noticed something strange. Where the bullets passed through the swarm, they left trails of light, human energy carried by human technology. The swarm recoiled from these trails. The crystals, John suddenly understood. They're not just storing energy, they're amplifying it. He turned to the soldiers. "Target the crystals." As one, they opened fire. Each bullet impact made the crystals pulse brighter. The heat lines in the cave walls began to glow stronger, and the central pillar blazed like a newborn star. Lyra began to weave energy between the crystals, creating a network of light. "Joan, the heat forge, it needs both kinds of energy to work." Human and heat weaver joined together. The swarm surged forward, desperate to stop them. But as each soldier fired, their shared human energy flowed through Lyra's weaving. The crystals sang with power, each one a different note, creating a harmony of heat and light. John stepped up to the central pillar beside Lyra. Without hesitation, he placed his hand next to hers. The connection was instant and overwhelming. Through it, he saw everything, the heat lines spanning the entire planet, the ancient network of heat forges, and something else. A pattern larger than Earth itself, connecting stars like dots of warmth in the infinite cold of space. "They're not the only ones who can merge," Lyra said, her voice echoing with power. The swarm screamed, a sound of rage and terror, as John and Lyra's combined energy surged through the heat forge. The crystals blazed brighter than miniature suns. The soldiers' shared vision expanded even further, letting them see beyond the cave, beyond Earth, into the dark between stars where hungry things waited. But the void wasn't winning this time. In this ancient place of power, human determination met heat weaver wisdom, and something new was born. The real question was, could they control what they'd awakened? Hidden powers. The heat forge blazed with combined human and heat weaver energy, its crystal formations singing a harmony that shook the ancient cave. But something was wrong. The massive surge of power wasn't just affecting the swarm, it was changing Lyra. Her silvery skin had become transparent like living crystal, revealing networks of pure energy flowing through her body. Where John touched her hand at the central pillar, the same transformation was spreading up his arm. "Too much," Lyra gasped, her voice resonating through the crystal formations. "The forge, it's not just awakening, It's evolving. The swarm of void creatures pressed against the barrier of light surrounding them, but now they weren't attacking. They were watching in what felt like awe. Through his enhanced vision, John saw why. The pattern of stars he glimpsed wasn't just a connection between worlds. It was a map of heat forges across the galaxy. Your ancestors, the swarm spoke, its many voices now harmonizing with the crystals. They didn't build the forges, they found them, just as we did. Lyra's eyes widened as ancient memories flooded through her transformed body. The first heat, she whispered. The ones who seeded the stars with warmth when the universe was young. The crystalline transformation reached John's shoulder, and with it came understanding. The heat forges weren't tools, they were seeds, each one containing the pattern for something vast and ancient, waiting for the right combination to bloom. The soldiers watched in amazement as their shared vision expanded beyond anything human eyes were meant to see. The cave walls became transparent, revealing layer after layer of reality. The heat lines they'd seen before were just the surface. Deeper patterns pulsed beneath, each one more complex than the last. Choose, the swarm said, its void-black form rippling. The forge is ready, but the pattern must be perfect, or all worlds touched by the network will freeze. Forever. Lyra turned to John, her crystalline form pulsing with starlight. The first heat left a choice to those who found their seeds. Creation or consumption, sharing or taking. The hunters chose to take, becoming the void they are now. My people chose to share, becoming heat weavers. And humans? John asked, watching the crystal pattern reach his chest. Humans, Lyra smiled, were meant to be the bridge. Not just sharing or taking, but transforming. That's why the sharing spread to your soldiers. Why you can see what even my people cannot. The heat forge's song reached a crescendo. The central pillar wasn't just light now, it was a window opening to somewhere else. Somewhere the first heat had left their greatest secrets. John looked at his fellow soldiers, their eyes glowing with shared power. He looked at the swarm, void creatures born from a choice made in ancient times. And he looked at Lyra, no longer simply a heat weaver, but something the universe had been waiting for. How do we choose? He asked. We don't, Lyra said, pulling him closer. We create a new choice. The crystalline transformation completed, covering them both. The soldiers raised their weapons, not to fire, but to offer their energy. The swarm moved closer, not to consume, but to contribute its ancient knowledge of the void. At that moment, in a cave older than Earth itself, 3 species touched by the first heat's pattern came together. Human determination, heat weaver wisdom, and even the swarm's deep understanding of cold and darkness, all flowing into something that had never existed before. The forge erupted with impossible colors. The pattern of stars blazed to life, and in the space between moments, the real transformation began. The first heat's final test wasn't about choosing between existing paths. It was about forging a new one, the final choice. The crystalline transformation had spread beyond John and Lyra, turning the entire heat forge into a living prism of impossible colors. Each facet showed a different world connected by the ancient network, some burning hot, others frozen, all waiting for what would happen next. But the most incredible change was happening to the void swarm. As the 3-way energy fusion filled the cave, the thousands of dark parasites began to crystallize too. Their hunger-driven forms gained new purpose, becoming living conduits between heat and cold, light and dark. We remember now, the swarm spoke, its voice now chiming like crystal bells. Before we chose the void, we were meant to be the balance keepers. Through their shared vision, now enhanced by the forge's power, everyone in the cave saw the truth. The first heat hadn't just seeded the galaxy with warmth, they'd created a vast system of cosmic balance. Heat weavers to channel energy, balance keepers to regulate it, and humans to bridge the extremes. But something was wrong. The crystalline network was growing too fast, too strong. cracks appeared in reality itself, showing glimpses of other dimensions where the first heat's experiments had gone wrong. Worlds burned to ash or frozen in eternal ice. The network's overloading. Lyra cried, her crystalline form pulsing with warning lights. Too much power, too many connections at once. John felt it through their shared transformation. The heat forge wasn't just connecting to other forges now, it was trying to connect to every point of heat and cold in the universe simultaneously. The pattern was completing itself, but the strain was tearing space-time apart. The soldiers' weapons had fully merged with their arms, becoming crystalline conduits of human energy. The cave walls showed scenes from Earth's past, ancient humans working with heat weavers, balance keepers teaching the first civilizations about cosmic harmony, all of it building to this moment. There's a reason the first heat left their network dormant, the transformed swarm realized. The universe wasn't ready. The three species had to evolve naturally, find each other by choice. But we forced it, Lyra said, looking at her crystalline hands. The hunters' attacks, my people's guardianship, humanity's development, we've compressed millions of years of evolution into this moment. The heat forge's song became a scream of stressed crystal. Reality buckled as the network tried to fully awaken. Through the dimensional cracks, they could see other versions of themselves making different choices, leading to different dooms. John suddenly understood. It's not about the power, he said, his crystalline voice resonating with certainty. It's about the choice. Not just our choice now, but every choice that led us here. He turned to the soldiers, their forms now shimmering between human and crystal. Every human who chose to help instead of hurt. He looked at the transformed swarm. Every hunter who chose to listen to their ancient purpose. Finally, he faced Lyra. Every heat weaver who chose to share their gift. The network isn't failing, Lyra realized. It's waiting, for all of us to choose, together. The dimensional cracks widened, showing more possibilities. But now they saw something new in them, not just failure and doom, but potential. Each crack was a choice, a path, a possible future. John reached out, touching one of the cracks. His crystalline hand passed through, and he felt other versions of himself reaching back. The soldiers did the same, each connecting to their alternate selves. The transformed swarm flowed through multiple cracks at once, linking different timelines. Lyra understood last. We're not supposed to make one choice, she said in awe. We're supposed to make all of them. The heat forge's song changed again, becoming a chorus of infinite possibilities. The crystalline transformation began to pulse in rhythm with it, each beat a different choice being made across countless realities. As the network of heat forges across the galaxy awakened, it wasn't choosing a single path. It was choosing all paths, creating a new kind of balance, not of heat and cold, but of possibility itself. A new universe. As infinite choices flowed through the crystalline network, reality itself began to stabilize, not by choosing one path, but by learning to hold all paths at once. The heat forge transformed, its ancient structure expanding to become a nexus point where all possibilities could coexist. John and Lyra stood at its center, their crystalline forms now shifting through different states of matter. Sometimes solid crystal, sometimes pure energy, sometimes something between heat and cold that had no name. The soldiers and the transformed swarm orbited around them, each one a living bridge between countless realities. The first heat, Lyra said, her voice echoing across dimensions. They didn't leave because their work was done. They left because they knew they couldn't complete it. Through the stabilizing cracks in reality, they all saw the truth. The first heat had seeded the universe, not just with warmth, but with potential. They created 3 species, heat weavers to understand energy, balance keepers to maintain harmony, and humans to imagine new possibilities. But the final step could only come when all 3 chose to evolve together. The swarm, once hunters driven by hunger, now flowed through the spaces between choices. Their void nature had transformed into something precious, the ability to hold contradiction, to be both here and nowhere, to understand both heat and its absence. "We're not ending the old pattern," John realized, watching as his fellow soldiers began to shift between forms. "We're becoming a new one." The Heat Forge's song changed one final time, becoming music that could only be heard by feeling its truth. Each note was a different universe, each harmony a different set of choices, all playing together in perfect balance. Lyra stepped forward, her crystalline form resonating with every timeline at once. "Look," she said, pointing to the walls of the forge. The scenes they showed were no longer just past or possible futures. They were happening now, all at once. A world where heat weavers taught humans to shape energy with art and song. A reality where balance keepers helped civilizations thrive in the void between stars. A timeline where Earth became a beacon of transformation, showing other worlds how to hold infinite possibility. Dimensions where the three species merged and separated and merged again, each combination creating new forms of life and consciousness. But the most beautiful change was happening in the present moment. The crystalline transformation began to reverse, not back to what they were, but forward into something new. John felt his form stabilize into a state that was both human and more, able to shift between energy and matter, heat and cold, possibility and certainty. The soldiers found themselves changed too, their weapons now transformed into tools of creation rather than destruction. They could see every heat line, every cold void, every choice point in the universe, and understand how to work with all of them. The swarm, once trapped in eternal hunger, now danced between states of being. They became living examples of transformation itself, showing how even the darkest void could learn to carry light. Lyra's final transformation was the most profound. Her heat weaver nature expanded to encompass all temperatures, all states, all possibilities. She became a bridge not just between species, but between different ways of existing. The Heat Forge, its ancient purpose finally fulfilled, began to change one last time. Its crystal walls dissolved into pure potential, spreading outward to connect with every other forge in the galaxy. But instead of a fixed network, it became a living web of possibility, each point a place where new choices could birth new realities. John looked at his transformed hands, now able to hold both starfire and void cold. He looked at his fellow soldiers, each one now a guardian of infinite choice. He looked at the swarm, finally free from hunger, now helping maintain the balance of all things. And he looked at Lyra, who smiled with eyes that could see every possible future at once. "What do we do now?" he asked, knowing that now meant something entirely different in their new existence. "Everything," Lyra answered, taking his hand. "We do everything." And in that moment, in a cave that was now a nexus of infinite possibility, humanity took its first step into a universe where every choice created not just one future, but an entire cosmos of new beginnings. The first Heat's final gift wasn't the power to choose between paths. It was the power to make every path possible.